Let's talk about the market in Australia because you and I were chatting earlier in the week. It's on a 25-year run. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so we're on into our 25th year of uninterrupted economic growth. So
That sounds terrifying to me. That is at once amazing and absolutely terrifying.
It's a wonderful thing in many ways, but as you say, it's put the Australian economy in a funny place. So that recession that you guys had a few years back, the GFC as we like to refer to it in Australia, we pretty well sailed right through that. The Australian government had a very strong balance sheet going into that, and the government at the time pumped a whole heap of money into the economy, and they did it via a quick injection. There are a whole heap of checks that got sent out and money deposited directly into people's bank accounts, and the government said, go and spend this, keep the economy going. And that was on top of a number of other fiscal spending programs. On top of that, the Australian economy is quite closely tied to China. We've had a wonderful tailwind of China's development over the last decade and a half, and they've had an insatiable appetite for our resources. China's economy has slowed down significantly, and we're starting to see some impacts of that in Australia, certainly in a lot of the commodity prices. But getting back to the GFC, the Chinese government rained a whole heap of money on their economy during that time as well, and that allowed us to just cruise right on through that period. And the result now is we've got some of the highest consumer debt in the world, some of the highest property prices. There's a lot of capital spending that's come out of the economy because we're no longer building these massive, expensive mines. It's put us in a funny place.
So I'm assuming that, and we'll get to the investing potential in a moment, but I'm assuming that there are people, including you and the whole Motley Fool team of analysts and advisors, who are gaming out different scenarios for the economy. And I have to believe one of them is that you have your own recession for the first time in 25 years. And how bad does that potentially look?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question. Our news headlines, there's a lot of people that are having guesses at how this may manifest itself. There's a lot of talk and an increasing amount of talk about a property bubble and a property price crash in Australia. It's really hard these things are notoriously hard to predict, and I can't sit here today and say I think it will manifest in this way. Back to the mining. Mining is a very small employer in Australia. It's hugely capital intensive, but it employs less than 5% of our population. I'll even say it's something closer to 3%. So in terms of the roll-off in the mining, we're not going to see a whole heap of unemployment directly related to that. The other counterbalance that we've got going on is the Australian dollar has fallen significantly. We were above parity with the US dollar for a long time when our resources were in great demand. Now we're sort of down around 70, 80 cents. Great time for Americans to come and visit Australia, and we'd love to have you. So that's led to a huge influx of tourists to Australia, and it's also, we've got a increasingly wealthy middle class in Asia sitting just above us. Australia is a very clean, green, desirable place for them to come and visit. So we're posting record international visitor numbers at the moment, and amongst the fastest growth is out of China. And there's a bunch of investment coming out of there as well. We've just had the largest land aggregation in Australia. Kidman Cattle Company was bought by a Chinese company, and there are a number of other examples like that across the country. So our low currency, the attractiveness of our country as a safe, clean place to travel to, rule of law and good rule of law and that sort of thing, it's an attractive investment destination. There's a strong counterbalance in the lowering currency, so it's hard to say exactly how it's going to play out, but there's some interesting dynamics there for sure, Chris.